Assassin's Promise by Thomas Woodward, Chapter 134. The dancers and other performers wended their way amongst the people of the city. Thick crowds had gathered in the streets, hoping for excitement of some form or another. Even the whisper of a promise of a performance could stir hundreds of eager townsfolk to follow in their wake. Calian followed, allowing himself to be swept up like a leaf in the mad dance that crashed people together. The madness that was the home to Calyapos alone, for only its people practiced the ancient ritual, this festival of fire. Bright beacons were lit from every wall in sight. Enormous bonfires rose into the sky, offering a continual flame. For these 20 days, uninterrupted, there would be no place for darkness and shadows to hide. Icons of the god Rorik were strewn throughout the city. Calian had never felt comfortable with the deeds that had been spoken of in hushed whispers, those carried out by the mad god's acolytes. The god of blood and greed. His desires were simple to comprehend. Even the most powerful saw the gain in openly giving support to Rorik's image. Groups of rascals, without the weight of the law behind them, claimed to be his power upon the land, and brought down havoc on those who refused to pay tribute to the brutish god. There had been more than a few skirmishes between the city guard and those roving groups of wastrels. Whenever some of their number were captured, rumors said they simply disappeared from their jail cells, although some people would believe anything they heard. Calian knew his city well, but it had become more dangerous, more sinister, since he had been away. As he passed another street, Calian raised his eyes and saw a familiar visage. His breath caught. The woman's gaze caught his eye. The head was barely recognizable, having been separated from its owner's body and impaled on a long steel spike that rose over one of the high city gates. Nearby, frozen in place, were some of the other faces he recognized from the crooked game of Saul he had played back in the back of a tavern only a day gone. Asric had casually promised no less to him, although Calian had scarcely remembered anything from that night when Asric's guards had laid him out. While the situation had been dire and could have easily ended in a back alley, Calian hadn't really thought these thieves would die. A cold tremor ran through him. His friend had been hard, vicious even, to those he did not care for, but the casual tone he had held belied the acts of a very dangerous man. His friend would not hesitate in killing others in order to get what he wanted. Would Asric turn on Calian if he failed to deliver? Surely Asric would not murder his own childhood friend. Calian would need to be more careful. Find the assassin, do this, and leave Calyapos, never to return. He had returned only to find death waiting, arms outstretched. Only a single misstep separated him from that embrace. Minerva pulled him along, oblivious to his dark thoughts. The woman had not asked his name once, he realized. It must be that any lord, no matter how important, could mean the difference between greatness and obscurity for any performing troupe. Minerva had recognized the coat of arms on his breast. Foolishly, he had kept the garb, announcing his status to any who cared to look. There was nothing for it now but to follow. She had a giddiness about her. It reminded him of the way he felt on the lovely voyage to reach this port. Calian hurried to keep up. Having spent most of his days in cramped taverns, at card tables, he found himself getting winded just trying to keep up with the young woman. The marching traveling players made a large swath around him. Several men carried various packs and stage props, all of them more burly than Calian. "We will perform for Lord Asric himself this night," Minerva announced happily. There was a grace and sway about her that left his mouth dry. Calian felt a stab as her words hit home. He could not be seen out in the open. Asric would be furious, but beyond that, his friend's enemies might recognize Calian. Minerva turned towards him, amid the sea of bodies that crowded them in on the main thoroughfare. "You'll grant us luck, our very own patron of the moment." She said the last with a rare smile that Calian felt all the way to his boots. He began to speak, but faltered. He had given his word to be their patron and give his blessing over their show. As a lover of great art, this was a gift and a great honor to take up. How could he dash her hopes and put a blight on the traveling show by retracting this offer of goodwill? Maybe there was another way. If only he could hide in plain sight. A mask! He had seen plenty of youths wearing the golden and crimson masks that had covered their features completely. Why not? If he could simply borrow matching cape, the audience would be none the wiser. He would still be able to give his favor over the success of the show. His blood pounded heatedly. And he would be able to stay in the company of the lovely young woman for another hour or more. Why did she call to him so? There was a deep, raw energy she exerted that made him want to follow her blindly. "Minerva, might I borrow a costume to cloak my identity? There are some I wish to avoid here in the city. I would not leave you without a patron, but perhaps I might simply camouflage myself a bit." Minerva looked down, her expression becoming rueful. "You don't need to stay. I was a fool to think you were here alone." Shaking her head softly, she began to turn from him in the other direction. Calian looked on sadly, not moving to stop her. Perhaps it was better this way. She turned once, and his heart almost broke as he saw tears stream down her face. He wanted to say something, but it was not his way. Making his decision, Calian moved to intercept a group of masked youths. They were talking animatedly. A cluster of 10 or more of them moved parallel to the troop of performers. "Excuse me, good sirs. I would like to purchase one of your masks and cloaks from you." Immediately the group surrounded him, blocking off avenues of escape. "Good sir! Aye, good sir. It's not so simple, I'm afraid. We're brothers, and it would be more than we could bear to lose one of the costumes we worked so hard to save up for. You understand?" Calian waited unfazed. He knew a scam when he saw one. He began to turn away. Wait! I can see the good sir is a nobleman, and you will want to dress elegantly for your lady love. Love! Aye, that is the greatest cause. Isn't that right, brothers? Well, poor Isar here is about your size, but we just couldn't part with such a fine set of clothes, you see." The man paused, waiting for Calian to say something in response. Calian figured they would try to bilk him out of every ounce of bronze to his name, if they had their way. This was a game of waiting. Whoever waited the longest would have the upper hand. "Come now, good sir. How much have you got on your pouch there? We're good, honest men, and we want to help you out, but it would be awful unreasonable of us to not see something in return for our troubles, eh?" One of the men prodded him, none too kindly. This was moving well past businesslike and right into back-alley thievery in the blink of an eye. Calian saw the group of performers move farther away, dwindling up the street. His voice would be lost among 1,000 other shouts and conversations that created a general cacophony of sound. The men moved in closer around him, forming a barrier between him and the rest of the crowd. Why, indeed, would they sell something when they could just as easily rob him blind? It was Calian's turn to surprise them. After all, he had seen his fair share of tough situations along the seedy gambling towns that hug the coast, from here all the way to the Great Reef. Calian lowered his hand from the sigil over his breast, marking him a lord of one of the great houses of Kaliapos. Although many of them had died out, people still knew of his house's coat of arms. "A lord, eh? You must be far from your bonny lass indeed. Don't worry, my lord. We're here to help spread the wealth. Now bring out your coin pouch. We won't touch a hair on your head. You'll still keep good company, if somewhat poorer for wear." Several of the men laughed at that, and they tightened the circle more. I don't think you get it yet. I am Lord Azric's man. I carry a writ of passage. If anything happens to me, he will hang everyone in the square until he finds those responsible. Calian spoke in an even tone. And I'm the king of the billowing isles, and this here's the queen of the desert wastes to boot. The man pointed at a portly man passing by in the crowd beyond Calian's reach. God's rocks, man, you're serious! The men erupted in gales of laughter. One pressed hands to his sides as if they hurt to stay standing. Calian took his coin pouch and held it up in front of the wheezing man, who still strained to catch his breath. The man swiped it, knocking him appreciatively on the shoulder. Rorik sighs. Make sure the missus doesn't let you out of the house alone next time. A few of the men passed by, sweeping mocking bows low enough for a court official. Look at the gold, one of the men piped up. Another looked back at Calian, slow movements marking his change in attitude. No man but a real lord would have this much. Fenley, give him your cloak and mask. Be quick, man. If a magistrate comes, we want no trouble. You paid for this fare by the desert salt you did. Calian stood there, accepting the cloak and mask that was hastily pushed in his direction. It was more than he had hoped to spend, true, but he had escaped with his neck intact, always a small blessing. He could win more coin given time. It wouldn't be the first time he had lived rough, with no more than a shirt on his back for possessions. He had seen men die over coin. It was just a means to an end. It wasn't worth his life. Humming a tune beneath his breath, Calian donned the cloak and mask and disappeared into the crowd.